Peter, thanks for taking the time to join us tonight in what is our third Tuesday of the month Zoom meeting for the BSSA. I was hoping you could start by showing us a little bit about your setup, maybe firstly your outdoor flights if you've got a moment.
So there's the outside flights. So I've deliberately have outside apiaries right from the word go. So I've got these, and they've been renovated by Johnny Ennis for me. There's some more of a look around. So yeah, I like the idea of having birds out in the garden. So yeah, we recently put a new roof on it. It was made originally from corrugated iron from my father-in-law's shearing shed. So wasn't brand new. None of this stuff was brand new. A lot of the timber was second-hand when I first started. This little flight in here is where the baby goes. So when I first started, this was my bird room. This section of here. It wasn't insulated or anything. I'm still not insulated now. It wasn't even lined back then. And I just had some breeding cages in here. Which, probably a bit out of focus. Little broken tap. And then out through here are the young birds. So basically, two flights, young birds on one side, which is this lot, and some culls on the other side. So earlier in the day when I was up here, it was a bit sunnier. They were all outside, enjoying themselves, getting a bit of vitamin D. As the afternoon come on, it will come in underneath, and it's about to turn a bit dirty outside, so I'm guessing they're getting ready for that.
Thanks, Peter. I'm sure you outgrew that bird room pretty quickly. Do you think you could show us out in the garden? I know you like to take a few plants out of there and feed them to the birds.
So a few things in the garden. This stuff here, it's a type of acacia. Really something that the birds hook into when they get the chance, when I prune it. Lots of natives in the garden. Really is Banksias. I don't know if it's Banksia, but you can see them really. This stuff, which is old man saltbush. It's really good. They hook right into that. Give it a bit of a hiding.
Thanks, Pete. You're obviously the first person that we've interviewed in this series that actually has outside flights. What is it that generally draws you to them? What is it that you see as an advantage there?
So there you go. One of the things I like about outside flights is when you get a shower of rain. That's where birds go, out to the rain. They absolutely love it. Just out in the flight, some young birds I haven't used. There's some birds that are probably going to be sold and haven't been sold because of the opposite situation. There's some birds that are going to make their home in other people's places, like that albino cock up there. When I get him to where he needs to go, young fallow top from last year, black ringer. He might get a go pairing up somewhere. There's a nice young clear body top. Bit of feather about him. A nice enough hen. The hen's down there.
Thanks, Pete. I'm wondering if we can take a look in the actual breeding room now and have a little bit of a look at the setup that you have there and possibly your soft food mix, which I understand you got ready to go.
Right, so soft food. So this is the basis of the soft food. This is the veggie part. So if we look down in there, we've got a couple of grated carrots, 300 grams of frozen corn that's been thawed out, and a couple of leaves of silver beet that have been chopped up, all mixed in together with a scoop of white egg. So a scoop about that big. So mix that in, this dissolves in the moisture in the mix. So white egg is basically a vitamin E supplement. I've got a mate who's a vet and a professor, and his specialty is andrology, so male repro, and he's retired now, but he said to me, and this is particularly talking about trying to get semen out of bulls, that the one thing in all of his time that he has found that improves male fertility is vitamin E. So I basically worked up a rate of how much of this white E product I need to mix in with my veggie mix, and I believe it's had a positive effect on fertility. It's not, as you can see, it's not cheap, and that does me about 2 months. So you're kind of talking about, $3 a day to add that to the mix. Over here, that's the finished product. That is basically those ingredients there. So 2 scoops of whole oats and a small cup of small carrot mix mixed in with some grey striped sunny. That all gets combined with a drizzle of good oil and some tummy rye. So I use the tummy rye plus. I like the calcium in it. There's not many times where I'm not feeding some source of calcium. Probably with the silver beet in there. Silver beet contains oxalates, and oxalates have a tendency to bind to calcium. So I know the birds like the silver beet, so I try and keep the silver beet in their diet. But I make sure that I'm supplementing calcium most of the time. So what happens next, and I won't be able to do it because I can't video and mix at the same time, but those ingredients there, the grains, basically get combined in this bucket with the veggies. So that's a 5 litre bucket, and that will be full to the brim basically, and that 5 litres will feed the 48 breeding pairs with a bit left over for the babies. So that basically, in a nutshell, is the daily soft food mix.
Peter, do you think we could have a little bit of a look around the general setup of your bird room? What you've obviously got in the room, how you house your seed, those kind of nuances that are, if we were to come for a real aviary visit, that would be obviously taken on board while you're talking.
So this is the workbench sort of area of the bird room. Buggy cabinet. The white hates having those buggy trophies in the house, so they have to live up here. There's our soft food that's about to be fed shortly. Here's the sink. So few tools hanging on the wall there. Probably those scissors and the tweezers get used the most. Here's old Joe. Some may recognise that bloke. Some may recognise the bloke with him. Bit of artwork from Guy Denning, very clever man. Some more of Connor Rubin's handiwork there. Few showcases help me pair up. There's the bench. Over here we've got some seeds, so there's our oats. Over in this bin we've got our seed mix. So when the BCV sort of endorsed the what's it called, Budgerigar product, I switched over to that, and I quite like it. I think it's got a nicer mix of millets in it than I was using previously. So that's the basic seed. Tonic mix in there. Thanks to Nash Benjamin, he gets that for me from somewhere over here, part of town, Thomastown or somewhere like that, I think. That's the grey striped sunflower mixed in with the small parrot mix. So that's it there, a bit of safflower and a few other things going on in it. That gets used in the soft food. What are out there? Some cuttlefish, millet sprays. I get these bad boys from Lindsay Hancock. The babies love them. We're not sure where they come from. His supplier tells him they're made in Australia, but it's pretty damn hard to get Australian grown millet at the moment. But anyway, even if they are from China, I'm not too worried. I don't have an aversion to irradiated seeds. I mean, all the irradiation does is basically disable the embryo in the seed. Might just change some of the vitamins, but let's put it this way. If irradiation reduced the energy content and energy value of food and seeds, it'd be a great cure for obesity, wouldn't it? You know, we just have to stick our food in some sort of thing like a microwave, irradiate it, take all the goodness out of it, still get to eat it, and not put on any weight. There's a thought.
I'm sure there's more than a few of us that would like to try that trick. Have you got any holding cages inside of the breeding room?
So just down in the holding cage down here, my old mate here, the blue cock, 2015 run. He's won the adult, he won the Untitled Field, he's won the adult field a couple of times. He didn't go to the Nationals because I was judging. What else we got there? It's Gazzard Cinnamon. Got a typical look of the Gazzard Cinnamon. Nice young green top. Here I'm thinking about what to do with him. It's just not quite in nick. This hen, we'll probably talk about her a bit later. She's a hen I want to work with, and I'll try and find a mate for her later this afternoon. And that's the Lucky Squares hen over the back there.
That Sky Opaline hen is a fantastic budgie. Very, very nice. Pete, do you think you could show us just, I guess, the general setup of your nest boxes, how you go about doing that?
Okay, so here's our nest box and our nest box prep. So in there we've got some Critter Comfort reptile bedding. This is the Koya product. Troy Holmes uses it. I found it to be the best stuff that I put in nest boxes. The hens tend not to show it out as much as the wood shavings that I used to use. I always put a piece of cuttlefish in the nest box right from the word it goes. They tend to smash that up as a general rule rather than smash the nest box up, so give you something to chew on. So here's the breeding cage set up. The nest box, or sorry, the nest box is always open for the birds in the, as soon as I put them in the breeding cage, I find that stimulates the pair, and they start laying a lot quicker rather than waiting for birds to bond before we open up the nest box. So,
thanks, Peter. Do you think you could talk us through possibly some of the pairings? I know you've got a few pairs up at the moment. Do you think you could talk us through, I guess, the reasoning behind that, and show some of the audience out there, I guess, what you're looking for in a pair, you know, what it is that comes into your consideration when you're looking at putting them down?
okay, so some pairing up. So, in an earlier video, I talked about the opaline sky blue hen. There she is. So she's a daughter of the guy who come third at Penrith in the opaline class. So makes her a niece of the winner of the same class, brothers. This cock here, opaline grey green cock, he is not from the same family, although there'll be some common blood way back in the pedigree. He's actually, his grandfather was a dominant pied from Dave Kelleher that was down here. And so I'm thinking I'll put these two guys together. They physically they seem compatible. Probably more so from the variety side of things. Like he's a nice, relatively clean opaline. She's got a few spots in her head, unfortunately. So people ask you, how do you breed clean opalines? I think the easiest answer is the way to breed clean opalines is start with clean opalines. You'll make your life a lot harder if you're trying to breed clean opalines with left-handed birds. So my thinking is you need to introduce the genetics of the clean bird into your opaline breeding program somehow, and then work with that. That's going to fast track things a whole lot more than trying to breed clean-headed birds out of dirty-headed birds. So anyway, these two are about to get a breeding cage. So here we have Cinnamon Cock. This bloke's the bloke who come second at Brisbane last year. There he is in all his fine breeding form. Paired up with nice little yellow-faced Sky Cinnamon hen, Spangle. They've got 3 chicks at the moment. He's just waiting for his soft food, which I'll see if I can give that to him now. Drop that in there. He doesn't mind a feed this bloke, just like me, because he looks a bit flatter than me. Anyway, they've got 3 nice little chicks. There's 2 of them up in here. 2 little spangled chicks on the go there. Disguised from another nest. I put that in there because he wasn't doing a good job of feeding the first one, so I put an older chick. And I've moved the oldest chick down to another nest. So I didn't get anything out of this bloke last year, but we're off to a good start this year. So here's a nice opaline cock who's paired up with an opaline hen, those grey grooms. Quite like this pair. I'm not getting a lot of satisfaction from them at the moment. Pardon me. They've got 1 chick that I've fostered out. They've got a few more full eggs now, and I'm not confident they're going to hatch. The 1 chick that I have got that I've got fostered out, I quite like. I'll show you that one in a minute. But yeah, they're a pair I've got a lot of time for. I'm just going to have to work out how I can get a few more chicks on first than these two. The facility's there, but getting them through to chicks on the first has been a bit more. So this is the baby from the pair of oaklings I was talking about before. It's only one, it's not a bad baby. One thing I do like about it, there you go. For its age, I like that lovely clean V in the back there, which is a really, when you breed an oakling, that's a really good place to start. But yeah, that's a nice enough sort of tick on it. So if I can get a few more of those, that'll be really good. I've got a couple of albinos here. This bloke's not looking too great at the moment. He's the guy that won the diploma at Melton this year. I think he might have had a bit of a run-in with the missus. Got a bit of blood on his ear. I'll see if I can pop the hen out. Come on, buddy, out you go. Thurn. A nice clear-body hen. They got one chick at the moment, which is an albino. That's probably obviously a hen. So yeah, he's not looking great at the moment. This bloke over here is a cousin. So their fathers were two grey splits that I had. This bloke's not too shabby either. He's paired up to a fairly flighty albino hen. Comes out of the net. He's a bit spooky. There's a couple of chicks fostered from them around the place. He's got some vices, this hen. He tends to choose toes on a baby, so we've just got to be mindful of that next round and stop that from happening. Anyway, a couple of albino cocks that I would have liked to have got to the young bird field this year, but anyway, I know that didn't happen, so here they are. So that's what you like to see, a bit of happening in the bird rooms, but that clear body cock's the guy that went to the Nationals last year. He ran about 6, I reckon, didn't get off the floor of the cage. So a nice albino hen. I'm not exactly sure, but I think she might be a sister of the diploma winner, the other albino. So anyway, they've been not long paired up. It took them a little while to lay their first egg. There are fertile eggs amongst them, so that's nice to get a start, even though it took an inordinate time. Oh no, 13 to the 6, they went down and they laid the first one the 9 to the 7, so a bit longer than normal, but you just need to be patient. We've got a young light green cock here. It's a bird that's a bit of a problem bird. He's got some feather problems. He doesn't want to grow tails. He's thinking a flight or two, but he has got some really nice features about him, and I'm trying to find a hen that I can put him with. So the first thing, given that he's got some feather problems, the first thing I'll look at with him is his birds without feather problems. So I've got some cinnamon opaline hens here. That one there. And there's a sister down there. There's also a big cinnamon hen at the back. Not as keen on the cinnamon hen at the back. She's nice hen when she blows, but she's a bit narrow across the top, across above the shears. She's a bit narrow. She looks quite impressive at times, but when she's not letting it go, she looks pretty ordinary. So, despite the fact that I was a bit concerned about that cock, I'm thinking that this end here is probably where I'm going to head. Yeah, I mean, let's face it, there's no right or wrongs in any of this. It's all about, you know, making judgments. But yeah, I think they'll make a nice enough pair. So, some more opaline. This is the brother to the grey-green guy. Paired up with his auntie. And they've got, unfortunately, they've only got one chick in their first round. Doesn't look like so far I've got some colour happening there, maybe. I'll have a look at the torch in a minute. There, one chick, I crossed it out, and it's up here in this nest here. Should be that chick there, which is not a bad opaline. Quite happy with that. Just sit still. It's a nice handful of a baby with a bit of something going on. Looks clean enough at the back. So I'm quite happy with that. It's in with some split fallows. So these split fallows are from last year's national winning fallow fox. So what I thought, or what I was told, a split fallow hen, little girl back there. But after about 8 chicks so far, I haven't got a red-eyed one yet. So I have a feeling that we may actually not be a split fallow. A nice group of chicks here, all just about to fledge. The blue's not from this nest, it's from another nest. Quite happy with these guys. There's a bit of size in these straight range. Their mother's actually the mother of the opaline cinnamon grey green that we were looking at pairing up with the light green top. This chick here I quite like. Nice big handful of the baby. Got a bit of something going on. Good depth of mark. So it could turn into something yet. Don't mind it at all. Here's the parents. Let's move this drinker out of the way and we can get a better look. So, there's the parents. Mum's had some feathers trimmed from around her eye. Got a bit dirty while she was feeding. But a good strong pair, and I like the chick. So a couple of babies. A few more foliage to go. So young double factor cock. He's a bit dirty at the moment, he's been feeding. And we're going to put didn't work away with a toast. And a nice spangled grey hen. So I had sort of like that. He was that double faced cock is one of the nicer young birds from last year. Not showing himself off very well at the moment. But I'm happy I've got a couple of chicks coming from it. A bit of something different going on here. I've got a couple of New South Wales birds. in this pair. So top Budgerigar cinnamon top, and hopefully cinnamon hen. So nice pair. The Oakland cinnamon hen is the daughter of a race laid top. So basically a lot of Gazar breeding in behind this pair. She's not a super hen, she's got a nice little top on it. On a monster, and see how they go. 2-6 is a good start. Okay, yellow face spangled cock. A nice sort of top on him. Pushed in sort of face. Doing the right thing. So first round I got 1 tick. Second round we're up to 2, 4, 6, 7. 4 of them have been fostered out, so the 4 oldest ones I've moved out. And there's 3 youngest, there's still 3 more full eggs. So we'll see if we can get those other 3 eggs out. So oftentimes I find it's best to move those older chicks out of the nest. Gives the young ones more chance, less chance to get the squat, and more chance of the remaining eggs to hatch. Where's the hen? There's the hen switch. Nice enough cinnamon hen. Nothing super, but not too shabby either. This little cinnamon baby here that came from actually a love pair that turned up out in the aviary, and I thought it's going to look too bad. So I put them in. Don't quite see those chicks, but I'll see if I can find the other cinnamon pair. Looks like a hen as well. So yeah. Something that I don't normally do. I like to try and keep my white cap pairings as normals or cinnamons. Rarely do I put a spangle in there. However, I really like this pair together. The hen is a niece of the big cinnamon sky cock, and she's got a bit of that same feather going on, that same frontal feather. The spangled cock, I really do like what he's got going on front on, but he doesn't seem to want to turn around and show us his nice frontal. I'll see if I can get him on a different angle. There's the hen. So she's obviously in feeding at the moment. We've got 4 chicks, and which I'm quite happy about. It'd be nice if they all turned into normals, not spaniels, but I don't think I'll be too worried either way. It should be just grateful I've got 4 chicks.
Okay. Now, Peter, have I got you off mute?
You have, ma'am.
Beautiful. Pete, one of the things we obviously didn't, and sorry, I should just check, you guys have all gone up into the right-hand corner of your screen and clicked on speaker view rather than the grid view, so that you can see Peter and I talking rather than everybody else. Peter, one of the questions we didn't touch on in the interview, how long do you leave your artificial lighting on for each day?
Yep, so it comes on around 6 o'clock in the morning, and it'll go off at about 10. What time is it now? Oh, yeah, no, we're right. And I run a little, so it's just basically 3 double fluoros in here on a timer. And I've got a small light. I'll see if I can do what I did the other night. You can just see up there, there's a little light on a timer. And that will come on. That will come on about quarter of an hour before the lights go off, and it'll stay on for a little while afterwards. So it's kind of my version of a night light, but I don't actually believe in leaving the light on all night. So it'll go off about quarter of an hour after the main lights go off. And when you get caught up here and it does go off, you just know. I mean, the birds go quiet straight away as soon as the fluoros go off. And it sort of kind of simulates a bit of twilight in some respects, and the birds just go really quiet. If they're out, they'll make their way back into the nest, and that's the end of it. So, but I'm not a big believer in night lights. I don't know. I'm not totally wedded to this theory, but I always think a hen. It's rare that a hen will leave a nest. I don't have too many hens that just abandon their nest. I mean, the hen's decided that that's a safe place to be and raise a chick. So why would she leave it in the middle of the night unless something's actually physically disturbed her? So in my bird room, there's not a lot of things that are going to, come and tap on nest boxes or anything in the middle of the night. So I tend not to get too many hens leaving the nest, and therefore I don't really need a night light.
Yep. No, fair enough. I've got a couple of people asking me, what are you using in the water back there? What's the yellow stuff?
Eden Valley Rieslings.
That's what
No, no, it's so I'm fairly lazy by nature, so I kind of do my water. As I say, I do it once a week. Technically I do it twice a week, but so I tend to throw everything in the water at once, and that'll happen on a Saturday morning. So in the water currently will be some Manuka honey, some Origo skim, apple cider vinegar, some vitamin B12, and given that it's yellow this week, it'll have Dufo Plus, the Marshall product.
Okay.
So next week it'll be a goldy brown colour because it'll have iodine in it. And I just swap those two parts of the water get swapped each week. And then as the drinkers get down or they get a bit dirty looking or whatever through the week, I just swap it out with fresh water.
Yep.
So just as needed, they get swapped. So it's sort of kind of done. The first bit's done fairly regimentally, and the second bit, swapping over to the fresh water, is just a fairly ad hoc thing.
Yep.
The reason I like those two Marshall products is because they're not sugar-based, and I don't get much sludge filled up in the drinkers. Years ago I used to use ornithon and things like that, which are powders, and you mix them up. And what I find is you just get a lot of sludge, whereas these two products, the iodine and the Dufo, are both water soluble, so they tend not to soil and go off like some of the other products do.
No, that makes good sense. One very left of field question for you. How do you manage to keep those pictures so damn clean in the bird room? Have you had Nerida up there dusting, or what's going on?
Mate, you should know that there's not much chance. The only time Nerida walks into the bird room is when she wants something, or wants me to do something. So no, mate, it's just the beauty of modern technology. You put it on a camera or an iPad or a tablet or whatever it might be, and look around here, and it looks $1 million. But I can tell you, there's a shitload of dust around. But in saying that, I vacuum every day, and that keeps the dust down. I've also got I've got a fan which I've turned off at the moment. I don't know whether you see that down the end there. So nowhere near as elaborate as your setup, old son, but that fan comes on every 2 hours and runs for about 20 minutes. and it's just on a basic little timer, and that does do a good job of keeping dust down. When I'm cleaning out the wire cages on the weekend, I have that running all the time. So it's really just a combination of vacuuming every day and having that running.
Have you always had the
does a
wire
good job.
cages, or did you ever have some of those wooden style breeding cabinets as well?
When I first started and I built the flights next door, as I mentioned in the video, I used recycled timber from a friend of a friend's pergola that they pulled down. I used corrugated iron off my father-in-law's old shearing shed that he pulled down, and salvaged stuff out of that. And I didn't have the coin to go buying, breeding cages. And there was a guy in our club who used to work at a printer, and the paper at the printers would come in these big reams that were sandwiched in chipboard. And every now and then, when they got an abundance of these sheets of chipboard, he would bring them around to my place, and I would just paint them up with a bit of white house paint, chop them up, and turn them into breeding cages. And that was what I started with in terms of breeding cages. Were basically just boxes made out of chipboard with a cage front on the front of them, and a nest box made out of chipboard as well with an ice cream container in it and a hardwood concave.
So what was it that actually got you into the budgies?
Oh, I just had them when I was a kid. You go around to a mate's place and he had them, and I thought, this looks all right. I'll have a crack at this. And the father's sort of a little bit partial to birds, so he wasn't against the idea of building me an aviary to start with. And a little small aviary, you could barely fit inside, then turn to a 20 by 10 big sort of flight out in the middle of the garden, surrounded by trees and full of budgies and diamond doves and finches and things. And then I started getting tea chests and trying to breed budgies in pairs within the flight, which basically didn't really work. Because they were always paired up to something else other than the bird that you had in the box with them. So I just let them colony breed, and then when I went to uni, over a course of a couple of nights, a fox got in and took most of them, and that probably put paid to that until I got married and I started this caper basically.
So how many cocks and hens are you running in now? I know you said you got 48 cabinets. What do you try and keep roughly at the end of the year when it's all said and done?
I don't know. I know you gave me that question in advance, and the true answer is I don't know. I don't have a target.
Maybe I'll have to send Maddie over, because she walks around the bird room and counts mine for me and says, 79 birds.
She's just counting the dollars.
What do you do?
Honestly, I am the worst colour of birds on the planet. I'm really quite useless. And so, I rely on auctions to help me cull birds. I said I'd put 10 in Riverina, I better go and find them, and that's basically what happens. And then I get left.
I'm waiting for Mark Fellows to take himself off mute here, because he actually, I think, has been awarded that award. He came down and helped me cull, and we ended up at +8. So he took 8 birds out of the cull flight and put them back in, and we ended up with no extra ones in there. So I ended up with more birds than we started with. So maybe the second.
Yeah. It won't happen this year.
Yeah, so honestly, the honest answer is I don't work to a number. I just sort of keep selling off birds that I kind of put a line through as I go along, or I've got like I say, the auctions are a great help for me to cull, because I just sort of pick them off. Obviously, there's some that go straight into the cull cage. They're the real obvious ones, the split fellows that didn't turn out and those sort of things. They're easy decisions. But let
me ask it a different way then. How many do you target to breed in a season? Like in your average season?
I buy 250 rings. Hang on, I'll just get something for you.
Don't forget you're plugged in.
I don't know whether you'll be able to see this. Can you see
Yep.
that?
We can.
Right, that's a graph of my breeding results in terms of birds run. So you can see last year was pretty good. We did 280 last year, which is up on 228 from the year before, which was 2018. And you can see the change from blue to green was the change from the old bird room to the new bird room.
Okay.
So if you think those high bars are around the 280 mark or thereabout.
And those bars represent a year?
You know, that each bar's a year, yep.
Yep. I had a
Yeah,
thought.
except for 13, 14, I reckon they might be those dodgy years where we had, you know, rings in the middle of the year. But as a general rule, you know, if I can pop out my 250, last year was good, I got 280. What did I ring today? I've rung birds that are about the 5th of July, and I've rung 130 odd by the 5th of July. And ring number 130 last year was born on the 11th of July. So I paired up 2 weeks later, and I'm 6 birds behind where I was last year. So
you're around the money.
I'm on the, yeah, I'm where I want to be.
So in terms of the birds themselves, so not numbers wise, but in terms of the Budgerigar, what are you actually trying to achieve this season?
Oh, breed a good one.
But in terms of breeding,
no, there's a couple of.
What are you trying to cement?
There's a couple. Yeah, there's a couple of little things on the go. There's always little projects within projects, isn't there, within a bird room? You probably picked up from the video that, you know, I'm trying to clean up some opaline, and you know, whilst I've got a couple of good opalines, or had a couple of good opalines recently, I'll probably try and ride that wave a bit, you know, and at the same time, you know, just try and understand a little bit more about how to clean them up. So, you know, that's just something that sort of keeps me a little bit more interested than anything else at the moment. But,
Yep.
you know, in terms of trying to breed a good fallow is always a challenge, because those things are just so inconsistent in the way they breed. You know, you put up 4 or 5 pairs, and the worst pair breeds the best one, and the best pair breeds the worst one. They really are they're just a dead set labour of love, those things. And, you know, I don't necessarily think that success is not necessarily commensurate with the effort that you put into breeding fallows.
No. No. Speaking of effort you put in, how long would you generally spend up in the bird room each day?
Not long. I get up here about 20 past 6, and I'm trying to be out of here by 7:45. And then in the afternoon, I always feed in the morning.
Yep.
And I like the idea of feeding in the morning because, you know, the chicks are empty, and I like to give the parents something to feed the chicks. So, and in the evening, I don't spend a lot of time up here. I'll probably be up here for about an hour, or no, not even an hour. Probably half an hour would probably max me out most nights. And that's just basically checking, making sure there's been no carnage during the day, writing down chicks that have hatched, those sorts of things. So it's just generally the housekeeping side of things in the evening. Every now and then I might spend a little bit more time, but not too much. I don't want to get too much budgie burnout, you know.
Yep. No, that's fair enough.
I try and manage that a bit.
I'm sure with all your BCV commitments as well, and your judging commitments, that that'd be a whole lot more likely than most of us to be susceptible to that. So, one of the other questions I got for you, Pete, I guess moving over to the outside flights, do you ever have any problems with, I guess, wild bird droppings, coccidiosis, any of those kind of things out there?
Believe it or not, no.
You've
which
got a roof,
is,
obviously, that covers them right in.
no,
No?
no, the end of those flights is open. I'm not, probably, I cleaned them up because I knew you wanted a video. I mean, normally they're reasonably clean, but sometimes it gets away on me, especially if I've got a few options on or something like that. So no, those perches are just sitting over concrete, and yeah, it rains on them, and I tell you, when it rains, they get down in that dirty stuff, and they chew on it and they do whatever. I have not treated a bird at this place for coccidiosis, ever.
Melbourne obviously has a similar climate to Adelaide. With the outside aviary, what sort of precautions do you take against extreme weather, like your 40+ degree days or your super cold days? Anything?
No,
No.
it's got a northeasterly aspect. You know, a lot of our weather is sort of frontal stuff that comes from over my shoulder here. So no, I don't tend to do anything special. Probably the one thing I don't do in summer is breed. So I'll breed from the end of February through to probably the start of December.
So one of the you sent me today showed me that the outside temperature was 4.4 degrees, felt like 0.9, and the bird room was keeping it at a modest, what was it, 17.6 or 12.6?
No, it was. I think it was more like 12. No, it was 12.6.
12.6. So the insulation.
It's 15 point something at the moment. But outside, where the birds are flying, it's cold. It doesn't bother them.
Yeah.
One thing I'll say. I mean, we're only 18-inch rainfall here, so what's that in for the youngsters? That's 400 mils annually, which is not a lot of rain in Bacchus Marsh. We're in a rain shadow, so maybe I can get away with having those open-ended flights a little more than some other people could. Guys in Queensland couldn't do it. But I'm also a believer that they've probably got some resistance to things like cocci. So, like I say, I've never treated a bird. I've had some. There's some down in the fridge down there. There's some coccidiosis medicine that I got after the Toowoomba Nationals, because there was a bird in the Victorian team that was a bit crook, and it was recommended for the birds that I had go to Toowoomba to treat them with that. It's the only time I've ever had birds treated for coccidiosis. So I don't know. I think it's just you've got to harden up around here. So.
Speaking of coccidiosis medication, what do you do in terms of bringing a new bird into the bird room? Do you treat it with any sort of medication? Do you keep it separately? What do you do? What's your regime?
I'm not a big medicator as a general rule. And so really for me, it's simply just pop them in a cage for a few days on their own and just make sure they're okay. It's really just watching for signs of stress more than anything. I don't treat them for anything as such.
Okay. In terms of, I guess, shifting gears over to your pairings there, we were talking, you mentioned in the video that you're pairing opaline to opaline, trying to bring in that clean head. And then you made the mention that you wouldn't normally put a cinnamon whitecap with a spangle. Are you adverse to pairing things like double factor to double factor or dominant pied to dominant pied, or is that purely, what's your reasoning behind that?
There's probably a little bit of truth in all of that. I try and make every post a winner, so I'm not likely to pair a dommy pied to another dommy pied unless I was really compelled to because of the two birds in question. Because I want to make sure, Murphy's Law would have it that I would, I'd pair a dommy pied to a dommy pied, and the best one that come out would be the double factor, and it'd get smacked on the bench. So, I like showing, so I want to try and make every post a winner that way.
Yeah.
The opaline thing is, I don't think you can solve the opaline problem by just breeding opalines for normals, because obviously the whole flecking thing is linked with is some linkage going on with the opaline genes. So, you know, I think you're only going to cure the opaline flecking thing with clean-headed opalines. I don't think you can wash it out with normals or anything like that. You can hide it, you know, you can hide it in a normal, but then, you know, if you've got a cock that's with opaline, it's only going to come back out later when he breeds the opaline chicks. So, you know, that's the rationale behind that. The white cap thing, that's just a preference for me, because I think I like white caps in normals and I like them in cinnamon. I don't like them in spangles as much, although spangles are the lesser, you know, they're the lesser evil by comparison to opaline. I really don't like opaline white caps. The reason I don't like that is because I don't think part of the white cap makeup is that real clarity of wing marking. You know, the white is super white and the wing markings are really, really clear. And you don't see that with an opaline. And you don't quite get that same effect with a spangle. And so I'm trying to breed normal wing white caps, and that's why that bloke was a deviation away from what I would normally do. But I really just wanted to double up on that frontal feather that both those birds had. So I said, well, bugger it, you know, I'll go against what I normally do, just for the type pairing rather than the variety pairing.
Yep, no, that makes good sense. One of the other questions that I accidentally skipped over, somebody was asking about the last section, with reference to those outside flights, do you think that the birds have a very good, strong gut flora based on, you know, the way you go about looking after them?
Yep. Yeah, I do. You know, yeah, I do, honestly. I mean, if they didn't want to get down and dirty and, you know, on the floor of the flight, they wouldn't. I mean, if they had an aversion to it, they wouldn't do it. So as much as it doesn't look particularly nice at times, you know, when they're down chewing on brown stuff on the floor, I don't get too hung up about it, because, you know, like I say, they wouldn't be doing it if they didn't want to do it.
Yep. And
I think the proof of the pudding's in the eating. You know, I'm not treating them for coffee or anything like that. So, and the other thing, just on that, you know, old mate in Sydney who often forks out a bit of coin for birds, who usually buys birds and then gets them gets samples sent off to a vet to just to check how manky they are inside. He has bought a few of my birds over the time, and he's never had an issue. So. Maybe another independent viewpoint.
One of the questions that came through, Peter, in terms of the white E, do you only give that to the breeding pairs while they're breeding, or before they pair up, and stop it once the chicks hatch?
No, I do it all the time, and you know, when I first started using it, I was a little bit wary as to whether I needed to, you know, ease it back out of the diet or not. I think I probably got it at a rate where it's not hyping them up too much. Yep. You know, some people may have had experience with the Necton E product, which is basically a water-soluble vitamin E supplement. And I have used that, and there's no doubt that works. I mean, that sends cough off their tree, you know, like that's just like, you know, Viagra for budgies, that stuff. But, you know, once there's chicks around and the hen's not really interested in copulating anymore, cockbird gets pretty frustrated pretty quick. So it's a difficult product to use, you know, in terms of managing it around the bird room, because different pairs are going to be at different stages. So you'll have it in their water and not in their water, and I need to get it out of that. And not only that, the stuff goes off real quick, that Necton E. I mean, it gets a real stink about it after a day or two. So, you know, this white E product I found to be really stable. I can, you know, if I wasn't here tomorrow morning to feed and the soft bird stuff's still in the breeding cage, I never have a problem with the birds getting sick. There's not much in there, and that's probably why I've chosen that sort of stuff to put in there, because it's not the sort of stuff that goes off too quickly. The amount of corn that I'm using means that most of that's getting consumed on the first day anyway. So it's not like there's a lot of corn that can hang around, because corn does tend to be a little bit of a harbourer of bacteria if you leave it lying around too long. So if you don't feed too much of it, most of the time the birds are cleaning it up. So
no, that makes good sense. this is a bit of an odd question, but what do you think has really what do you think's made the difference for you in terms of being a breeder? You've obviously won 9 national titles. What do you think it is? What sets you apart from the others?
Luck. And I mean that. I'm not trying to be smart by that. I mean, I was pretty lucky when I first started, and I bought a $20 cock of Alan Houses at Geelong auction, and he bred me a lot of good babies and started off both my grey greens and my clear bodies, because he was by a split clear body cock, so there was a chance he was a split clear body. So I used him in the clear bodies, and he wasn't split clear body. And then when I saw what he was breeding for me in amongst these clear bodies, I started breeding into normals, and that's where all the grey greens come from. So, I was lucky to hit on that bird, and I was lucky that he bred for me, and I was able to, capitalise on that for quite a number of years. And I still do. When I look at, I use that. It's another one of your questions. I'll just jump ahead. That Budgerigar program from the States, and I often, there's an analysis in that allows you to look for common ancestors between birds, and that AH2 bird comes up fairly often when I put 2 birds together, and a lot of them all have 5, 6, 8% of his genes in common, So he's been extremely influential, that cock, right through the whole place. There'd be hardly a bird here that hasn't, even the fallows, he's in behind the fallows, and you get those birds every now and then, and I think everyone will get one at some point in time, and it's just a matter of being lucky enough to recognise it and harness it and milk it for all it's worth,
Recognising it and milking it for all it's worth, I think, is a common theme that I guess in some of the other Zoom interviews as well we picked up on. Let me ask the question to you a different way then, because the only lucky guy on here tonight's Michael Mear, who won your bird. And we can't all be lucky. What advice would you give to a beginner then? What you've done, knowing where you've gone and your success in Budgerigar, what would you
I'll tell you the advice I wouldn't give them, and this will be contrary to what a lot of people think. Don't buy all your birds from one place. Go and buy them from wherever. Go and buy them, but don't buy the name. Buy the bird. Buy the bird, and if it's from an unknown breeder or whatever, and it's got the feature you're after, grab it and use it. This job's all about trying to put together features on birds and combining those features from 2 disparate birds together and trying to get that to melt to come together in one of their offspring is what we're trying to do, So I'm not a great believer of just hooking into one person's stud and just staying there. I tend to, if I go to an auction and I see a bird that's, from anybody, I don't care who it is, and I like it, I'll buy it. And I'll try and suck out of that bird the features that have attracted me to that bird, So my advice would be, don't get sucked into this idea that, I'm going to base all my birds around one bloke. I'd get out there and buy features in the birds and not worry too much about bloodlines, would be my advice.
So I think that probably answers the next question then, because I had somebody asking, do you prefer to pair based on genetics or how the birds that actually visually complement one another?
I like, because genetics is my game during the day, you'd probably think that I do it, from a genetic point of view, but it's 90% visual.
No, I would visual based on your last explanation.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely visual. And then I'll look at the pedigree and, if I like the look of it, well, that's all well and good. If I don't like the look at it, I'll probably still do it. The green and the cinnamon opaline that I paired up the other day, I worked out that they've got, about 4 crosses to a Bob Smith cock that I bought a long time ago, in that pedigree. And, and I thought, oh, well, that's handy. I'll I'll work with that, because you know he was a good budgie, and there was a grandson of his, 86, that was here, and he was a good budgie too. So when you see things like that in the background of the pedigree, when you look at the pedigree and you see those birds in the background, it just affirms what you're thinking when you put those two birds together visually.
Yeah.
So I like to use the pedigree as like a kind of like a second check, you know, of what you're seeing in the two birds that you're working with.
Yep. Now tell me, what is it that you don't suffer well in budgerigars? My assumption from the outside looking in would be size. But what is it that you just can't stand in the bird room? What is it about those features that you don't like?
Yeah, size is pretty important. You know, and probably in recent times, though, in you know the last, I would say in the last 5 to 8 years, I've compromised on size a little bit in my birds to try and bring in some more modern features, and so there's probably a little more variance in size in my birds now than there used to be, and that's all just been trying to, you know, me trying to capture some of that, you know, better depth of mask and that more directional feather amongst my birds. So, you know, everything comes at a cost.
Yeah.
And you know, the quest to try and find those modern features has come at a cost of size in my birds. However, you know, when I get a nest like those 3 grey-green babies, even though they may not all be, you know, world beaters, they have got some size, and they'll more than likely be staying here because of that. So, you know, you need big ones to breed other big ones, or if you want to breed good numbers of big ones, you need enough of them around the bird room. If you're going to play with little birds, you're going to get the odd big one every now and then, but they're going to be few and far between.
Fair enough. Tell us, over the years you've been breeding budgerigars, what are the most significant changes that you've seen in the hobby?
In the hobby?
Well, in breeding or...
Oh, look, I think birds, there's no doubt since I started, and you kind of see it in those national winning photos, you know, the opaline clear body that won the nationals down in Thurn in 2009. You know, you look at where varieties like clear bodies have gone since then, you know, like he'd hardly rate a mention here now. You know, the bloke who won 6th last year, you know, he would have absolutely smashed that class down in Tasmania, even if he didn't get off the floor of the cage. You know, so I look at varieties like clear bodies. I look at, you know, where black eyes are heading. Some of the dilutes kicking around. You know, I see those varieties in our hobby, and I think it's testament of the way we've set up our national shows. You look at fallows. I mean, God, when I first started, you could hardly find a fallow with a modern face. You know, now there's lots of guys punching them out. You know, like there's some good fallows kicking around. You know, Normie Wheatley's fallows and Wayne Case's fallows. There's some really nice budgies amongst them. You know, so I think, you know, the way that we've tried to foster varieties through our national show and through, you know, the way that filters down through club shows and things like that has been one of the best things for the hobby, you know, and I think we just need to make sure we keep a focus on that and not try and reduce the emphasis that we have on varieties.
So speaking of the hobby in general, what are your thoughts on what we can do to continue to grow the hobby? Obviously, things like this, these Zoom meetings are a very good uptake rate, things like that, being able to see a little bit about the world. But what do you think we can do to attract the next generation of budgerigar breeders?
Yeah, look, I think these Zoom meetings have been a real, you know, just a real boom. You know, they're, I mean, they're everything's born of necessity, isn't it? Really. So these are certainly in that basket. Look, I think it's really hard, Troy. I mean, when I look around, you know, we're on a block here that's 1,400 square metres, so we got a nice size block in town. But you know, there's a lot of places where they'd have 3 houses on it. So your ability to have a bird room and you know, your ability to have a zinc-aluminum aviary in your backyard is pretty damn limited in a lot of cases. So I think we need to target or think about what areas we need to be targeting. You know, and one of the things the BCV is doing is putting together we've got a marketing plan, and you know, some of that is trying to target some of those areas outside of the metropolitan area where people can still, you know, have an aviary in their backyard and breed birds. So you know, in those surrounding areas surrounding the metropolitan area and the country areas, I think is where your target audience is, because I think, you know, in those new developments, those 400 and 500 metre square blocks, you know, around the place, you're not going to find too many budgie breeders there, because they just physically can't do it. So I think we need to be smart about who we're targeting in all this. I think we need to, you know, the whole social media thing. I'm one of the administrators for the BCV Facebook page. And constantly, you know, there's new requests for membership all the time, or membership of the Facebook page. What we're going to do is work out how we turn that into the next step. You know, how we turn that person that's got 2 budgies into a person with 22, and engage with those people. So I think there's some of the real challenges, because, you know, you only have to look at the faces around the, you know, on the screen here today. We're not all young, you know, and I think that's the thing, that's the challenge. The biggest challenge is hobby faces is the simple fact that, you know, our mean age is probably got a 5 in front of it rather than the 3 in front of it. And I think that's something that we need to change if we want to keep this job going. So need to try and work out how we get to the youngsters.
Good point. I've got a couple of, I guess, sort of individual questions here. Gary Gazzard has just written, "Speak for yourself, you old," and I won't repeat the last. Got a question here from Mark Bernard. He's asked, what features do you consider dominant, and is lateral feather recessive?
Oh, I don't think it's either. I think Don Burke's, you know, had a bit of a theory at one point that, you know, directional feather is more probably sex-linked and more related to the hen than the cock. There might be a bit of truth to that, but one thing I do know is that characteristics like that lateral feathering or, you know, directional feathering, it tends to be, amongst our birds here in Australia, it tends to be controlled by a lot of genes, not just one gene. So it's not dominant, it's not recessive, it's you know, polygenic, or, you know, so it's something that's not just you've either got it or you haven't. It's, you know, if it was recessive, it'd be just easy, you know, because you just put 2 carriers together and out will pop a nice one, and you just sort of do the quick maths, and you'll work out that, oh yeah, I've got, you know, 25% of them have got it, so therefore it's recessive. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
You know, there's too many genes. There's a lot of genes involved in that. There's a lot of genes involved in most of the characteristics we breed for in budgies, except for colour.
Yeah.
You know?
I've got another question here from Chris Murphy. He's asking, why do you use a shelf in the nest box?
Because that's what they come with. They come with a shelf. That's how they were made. I didn't make them, but I like it. And, you know, one of the things I've been mucking around with, might be because of the cabin fever, is I've been looking at those PVC nest boxes that they have overseas. And, you know, I really like the ones that I saw when I was travelling in Europe with the Budgie Grand Tour. But I think for my breeding cages, they're probably a bit too big, but I'd like to be able to replicate what I've got hanging off my cages currently in PVC. So I've been looking around different websites in Australia, people manufacturing out of you know, 3mm PVC, to see whether I could find somebody that I might be able to get 50 of these made out of PVC. So I haven't found anybody yet, but I like the design. The design works for me. So if I could just replicate it and make it plastic and make it a bit easier to clean, that's my next challenge, basically.
I've got another question here, and I think they've misspelled their name. It says Dodgy Lovers, but it should probably be Dodgy Brothers.
Dodgy Brothers, yeah.
It does say Dodgy Lovers, and it says, Pete, how far will you go for an Avery? Can you tell us a story?
That depends who you're visiting, Troy. So, when was it? It was 2016, I think. And there was a group of us set off to Europe to understand European and English budgies a little bit better than we currently do. And we had we were visiting Mike Ball, and we had some accommodation arrangements that kind of fell through. You know, he was going to, there's a couple of us were going to be put up at a neighbour's place, and for whatever reason, that didn't kind of come together. So there was enough beds around the place, except for one. There was one double bed, and there were two blokes. And so, you know, someone had to take one for the team, and it certainly wasn't going to be Gazard, and Mark had Beck to snuggle up to. So yeah. Anyway, it's all history now, Troy.
Is it?
And it didn't hurt a bit. So.
Is it pure coincidence that you send him birds occasionally as a thank you for?
I send you birds too, and nothing's happening there yet. So,
on a more serious note, how many lines of budgerigars do you generally keep? You've got the platinum line. How many others do you have?
They're kind of these days. They're kind of split up around variety. So, you know, what I term the platinum birds are probably the birds that go back to those original grey greens. Yep. And they've had an infusion of a whole lot of stuff in them since. You know, I bought that yellow-faced grey cock of Gary's and Alan Drury's that you were losing bidder on, Troy. Just to remind you.
Thank you.
And he bred a shitload of good budgies for me. You know, his genetics have been worked into that line. The clear bodies and the Enos I tend to keep together as a line. And, you know, even though they're an offshoot of that same family of as the grey greens, I tend to sort of keep them together as one line. The fallows, obviously, you know, by nature, they tend to be their own line anyway. And you've seen some of the pedigrees of those things. They're just so damn tightly knit that, you know, the challenge with them is to try and get some better blood into them and getting it to stick, you know. So pretty much these days there's only really the three lines within the aviary, and it's kind of variety based more than anything else there.
So tell me, in amongst the cocks and the hens, do you have an opinion on whether you think one or the other tends to affect the quality of the babies more, the hen or the cock?
Look, you know, genetic theory tells you no. You know, it's 50-50, and I believe that. The only difference is you get more chicks out of a cock than you do a hen. And so when I'm evaluating a bird, the cock bird to me becomes more influential because I know that, you know, I can probably breed with him almost all year, whereas the hen, I'm going to breed her for half a year. You know, so with a bit of careful management, I can probably get 4, maybe even 5 rounds out of a cock bird in a year. Yeah. Whereas the hen will have less influence in the stud overall. But in terms of the pairing, the actual pairing, at the end of the day, they're going to have roughly equal influence.
Yep. I'm having a question asked. Can you tell us a little bit more about those oxalates you mentioned about silverbeet?
Yep. So a lot of that family of vegetables, and I'm not real up on things like kale and that sort of thing. Gary Gazard probably knows more about this than me. He eats kale and shit like that.
Certainly, he used a lot of coconut oil on his kale, and I worked out it was because it helped it slide off into the bin. He didn't eat it, rest assured.
So, yeah, I mean, oxalates are present in things like spinach and silver beet, and what they have a tendency to do is bind as calcium. So, you know, I don't know whether you remembered Mike Ball was saying he stopped feeding silver beet because of that. And I suppose my way around it was just to feed more calcium. So, again, just when I think about, I haven't had a touch wood, I haven't had an egg-bound hen yet this year. I feed calcium, I feed that tummy right. Basically, through the summertime, I feed that the grain mix, the grain part of my soft food mix. I try and feed to the birds out in the flight most of the time. So that's the oats, the small parrot stuff, good oil, and the tummy right plus. So try and keep the calcium in them. And this year, like I say, touch wood, I haven't had an egg-bound hen. I've had one hen, probably the best hen I bred last year, who was laying soft eggs. And even when I pumped a bit of liquid gold into her, it still made no difference with her. So, you know, I'll bring her in and try her again, but I think there's more going on with her than just a lack of calcium.
Yep. I've got a question down here from Dan. He's asking, do you know the background of that original Alan Howes bird?
Oh, a bit of folklore. Alan Howes was a good mate of Ross Lopes. Ross Lopes used to have a bird, and this is before my time, called Mr. Magic. And he was apparently, I think he was a cinnamon, but I'm not sure. And, you know, apparently he was a pretty damn good bird that was doing the rounds here in Victoria a fair while ago, over 20 years ago, I suppose now. And I have a feeling that young opaline cock was like a grandson of Mr. Magic. So, you know, when I was at the auction, there was that cock who had his head buried in the corner of the cage most of the day and wouldn't get up off the perch. And he had a really nice sister, a nice opaline sister that I tried to buy, but, you know, I got a bit scared. And not that I think she might have made about $150, but for me at the time, that was getting scared. Probably still is really, but so, you know, when I dipped out on the hen, I bought the cock, and yeah.
The rest is history.
Yeah.
All right. I think we've gotten through all of the questions that everybody's put through on the Zoom chat. Donna's just put through on there, excellent stud of birds, Thurny, and a very down-to-earth bloke. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and showing us around your stud. So I'm sure Don is sharing the sentiments of all the other people on here tonight. Thank you very much for your time.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks for making your time available. Always nice to talk to nice people.
You're very welcome. All right, we'll pass back to Chris.
Thanks, Troy. Thanks, Peter. Fantastic interview, gentlemen, and well done on the pre-work and well done on tonight. So thank you very much for that. Our next meeting is the 4th of August, Tuesday the 4th of August. I'm not sure whether we have our virtual aviary tour organised as yet, Troy. I think we're just waiting on the thumbs up.
We've actually just got the thumbs up while we're in the meeting that it's confirmed. It's all good on their end.
Okay, do you want to announce who that's going to be?
Sure. So the McGoverns from the UK, who've recently won the Budgerigar World Show, back-to-back, I believe. The only ones to do it with a young bird and then 2 adult birds. So we're going to be interviewing Joe McGovern on the 4th of August.
All right, thanks for that. So that should be an excellent opportunity to get some first-hand knowledge back from the UK. So that'll be a 7:30 Australian time start, Adelaide time. So sort of work around that, and I'm sure it'll be on. We'll put it on the Facebook page, and we'll get that out there so everyone knows what's going on. The other thing on our Facebook page too is all the upcoming auctions that we've got planned. So if you can link into that, that would be appreciated, so you know what's going on. Once again, thank you, Peter, very much. Thank you for the Lucky Squares bird as well. I'm sure the winner will be wrapped with winning that. And thank you to everyone that's logged on tonight. Appreciate the effort and appreciate your time. Thank you very, very much. So, Jonathan, over to you. Just as people log off, just close it down in a couple of minutes if you can, mate. Thank you very much. Good night.
Bye all.
Guys.